Great evening, everybody. God bless you. I pray that you are having an amazing day and that you are ready for the evening word. I am Elder Janelle Strickland, and I'm here in my office at my favorite place of worship where I serve at Maximizing Life Family Worship Center, home of the Max Life Church, where my servant leaders and pastors are Pastor Omar Rojas and Pastor Brandy Rojas. And I would be remiss if I did not take time to acknowledge, thank, and honor the visionaries for the evening word in the persons of Pastor Ronald Jennings and Lady Dr. Nicole Jennings. I honor you. God bless you both and the entire Elam family. And thank you for allowing me this opportunity. Let me tell you something. I'm going to serve notice on the devil right now, because it seems like every time I get to this place to render what God has given me for his people, the devil gets busy and tries to prevent it. You have no idea what goes on behind the scenes in trying to get ready for the evening work. But guess what? We are here. We are victorious. And to God be the glory. This word of God is going forth on tonight. I hope that you all are navigating this pandemic safely and that you are following the precautions that have been set out for you. And the reason why I say this is because between the last broadcast last week and today, my daughter was diagnosed with COVID-19. And the reason why I'm not upset is because she is successfully navigating the healing process. She's not one of those horror stories that you see on TV. She's not on a ventilator. She is not feeling well, but she's in the healing process. But as a part of that, let me tell you, I, being mom, was the one that took her to the emergency room. I was the one who brought her back from the emergency room home, me and her daughter. So as a part of that, now I have to follow certain precautions. And the reason why that is important is because I had to isolate, I had to quarantine, and I had to go get a COVID test. And God said to me, in the middle of all this going on, the precautions are not meant to be a prison. I said, really, God? Really? The precautions are not meant to be a prison. And I'm like, okay, God, where are you going with this? So he takes me over to Genesis chapter 8 and chapter 9 to study the story of Noah. Now, growing up, if you like me, you heard the story of Noah and the ark probably in Sunday school or vacation Bible school, or you may have heard it in youth ministry. And if you're a part of the young adult choir or the youth choir, you probably sung a song that told the story of Noah and the ark and the animals and all of that. But what I thought about is I bet those who were teaching the foundational principles that were contained in the story of Noah and the ark, they did not realize that at some point it would directly correlate with the pandemic that we're in today. Now, I bet you're wondering, what does Noah and the ark have to do with the pandemic? Well, what did he have to do? He had to build the ark. He had to isolate his family. He had to get all the supplies. He had to get all the animals and everything in the ark. And he had to stay there until he was released, till the waters cleared up. Well, what happened when COVID-19 first hit the United States? What did they tell us? They told us to take the necessary precautions. Take the precautions to get your family together, get everything that you need, and isolate until you're released from the restrictions. But the precautions were never meant to be a prison. And many people have been in isolation for months now, and it can be challenging to isolate. People begin to feel like they're forgotten about. Some even feel like God himself, he forgot about me. Let me dispel that right quick. Let's go over here to Genesis 8:1 in the Amplified Version. Let's see what God said about Noah when they were out there and they were in isolation. And God remembered and thought kindly of Noah and every living thing and all the animals that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind blow over the land and the waters receded. And God remembered and thought kindly of Noah and every living thing and all the animals that were with him in the ark. Listen, if God didn't forget about Noah, then he hasn't forgotten about you now. But I understand, and I'm not diminishing that isolation can be challenging, but check this out. They want us to isolate to prevent the risk of exposure. But isolation in itself causes its own exposure. And I'm not just talking about COVID-19. See, when you isolate, now you got to take that look at yourself. The lack of social interaction, activities, and other things are not going on. So now you got to look at you. And the isolation exposes issues that you've let go on unaddressed. And I'm going to say this, and I'm sure somebody's not going to like it. And I may even lose viewers and followers for saying it. But isolation has exposed issues even in the church, in church folk, and kingdom. Even in the world, there are certain things that are going on. You probably say, okay, what is that? Well, news sources have reported an elevation in domestic violence, elevation in the rate of depression and suicides, higher divorce rates, higher occurrences of child abuse. And the news reports that they attribute these new higher rates and these occurrences to the mandatory restrictions and stay-at-home orders. See, now what has happened, people have to face the truth that they managed to avoid simply because of other things going on. Now that they're at home isolated, the realities of life is beginning to unfold. Now imagine yourself like Noah, okay? Some people are isolated at home with a beast of a different kind. Rapes, molestations are going up. Some people are locked in with demons that they're married to. Abuse of drugs, alcohol is going up. Now that you're in a confined space, whether you're with somebody or not, you're forced to take a look at you and deal with you. Now, Noah and the ark, they didn't have the current liberties that we have. Now, even though they say stay at home, you can choose to go out if you want to. There may be some legal ramification for it, but you can choose to go. And some have. But in Genesis 8, where God remembered Noah and all the living things that were with him and all the animals and everything that was in the ark, from that point of remembrance, let me catch you up on some things that have happened. He's in the ark. He's locked in. He's waiting on his deliverance. And God remembers. So now, when God remembers, this is evident of the return of God's mercy, his grace, and his access to mankind. And when God remembered, he went into action. He sent a wind to dry up the earth and place the water in its respective places. The same God who delivered the desolation and the destruction is also the same God who is bringing forth the deliverance and the release. And since it didn't take one day for the earth to drown, it took more than one day for the earth to dry, which is evident of the process of deliverance. It gradually took place. But Noah follows God's instructions in sending out the doves until he is reassured that the water has dried up, and God releases him to leave the ark. And that brings us up to our text for this evening's sermon. Genesis 9:20-29 in Amplified versions. Let me read it. And Noah began to farm and cultivate the ground, and he planted a vineyard. He drank some of the wine and became drunk and was uncovered and lay exposed inside his tent. Let me stop right there. Remember earlier when I said that isolation has its own exposure? Noah is isolated in his own tent, in his own house, by himself. And he lay exposed inside his tent. Moving on. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw by accident the nakedness of his father, and to his father's shame told his two brothers outside. So Shem and Japheth took a robe and put it on both their shoulders and walked backwards and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away so that they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine-induced stupor, he knew what his younger son Ham had done to him. So he said, "Cursed be Canaan, the son of Ham, a servant of servants. He shall be to his brothers." He also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge the land of Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." Noah lived 350 years after the flood. So all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Fresh out of deliverance from the ark. Now he's back in a place of isolation. And he finds himself naked and drunk and exposed. Now, in between where God remembered and the process of making sure that the ground was dry and that it was okay for him to leave, when God released Noah to leave the ark, one of the first thing that he did was build an altar, offer sacrifices, and honored God through an act of worship. This is important because remember I told you in 8:1, God remembered Noah, so now Noah is remembering God. He didn't forget to be thankful to God. Amongst all of the dangerous and ravenous and savage animals and beasts and their instinctive natures, nothing happened on the ark to Noah and his family. God spared them and provided security during their time in the ark. And so his first act is not to go build a house, not to go restart life, but his first act after the deliverance is it's time to worship. Now the releases come, and Noah and his family are out of the ark, and they're restarting their lives. They're following the instructions that God has given them concerning being fruitful and multiplying, as well as the guarantee that he's not going to destroy man by water again, and confirming through the reminder of the rainbow. Y'all know the story. Now they're in a place that life has restarted. And Noah has this new vineyard. And in his human weakness, he partakes in the wine that the new vineyard produces, and he becomes drunk. Now we find him here, drunk and naked. He just got delivered. He just worshiped, and now he is exposed. An issue came up, and now somebody's walked in on it. Many times, even after a great deliverance, we have to face the reality of our own humanity and the next issue and the process of deliverance that is attached to that. Noah was in his own tent. He was inside, isolated. He was away from everyone, and his issue is exposed. Let me throw this in here for thought. Listen, church folks, and kingdom. Now that you can't run to the church house all the time, the issues that you swept under the rug are now being exposed. And somebody has walked in on it. Close friend of mine said it best. Everybody cannot handle drunk Noah. In other words, we all have our rights and we all have our wrongs. We have all sinned and come short of the glory of God. Even when it's just us by ourselves in our own space, the issues that we've swept under the rug come to an all-time high because we didn't deal with them before. Now, Noah's son has walked in on his issue. Now, Noah, he had kept sober in drunken company. He was now drunk in the sober company of his son. And his excess of wine put him in a place that his son could not handle. So what does Ham do? He goes out and he tells his other brothers, Shem and Japheth, listen, your issue is going to come up in a place of isolation. Because you are subject to think about things that you normally put off thinking about because you have the activities of life going on. Well, I'm not going to deal with the issue that I'm living with a demon who is physically abusing me or molesting me or raping me. I'm not going to deal with this demon of pornography and promiscuity. I'm not going to deal with the sin because I've got other things that need to have my attention instead of my deliverance. But guess what? It's time to stop dancing in the graveyard. People are rejoicing over the freedom and deliverances that others have and going right back home to the same struggles. It is not of God, for whom the Son has set free is free indeed. And you don't have to stay in the graveyard, in a dead place, feeling departed and separated from God. Listen. Noah's drunk and naked. And the isolation has caused an exposure of an issue. And there's one who walked in and saw the issue. You had to run tell that syndrome. But there were two others, his brothers, and they are equipped to handle the issue, address the sin without mishandling and destroying the individual. How key is that? We live in a day and time where there's a double standard in the kingdom. I want to do my mess, but I don't want you to mess with mine. But there are those who are assigned to you, just like Shem and Japheth, who God will allow them to devise a tactic of supporting you and helping you to get through your process of deliverance without destroying you. Because the precaution was never meant to be a prison. It was meant to be a pathway to your release. And during times of mandatory isolation, even I have reflected and discovered that there are areas that I needed God to intervene in. And you too may find yourself somewhere indulging in the excessiveness of sin and things that are not of God. But guess what? God has not forgotten about you. And there is a pathway to get from the prison that you're shouting in to the place of freedom that God intends. Don't allow just anyone to help you to navigate your deliverance, because everybody's not assigned to you. Some people are going to have the spirit of Ham and run tell that. While there are others who will be like Shem and Japheth, who will help, who will come in, who will pray, who will hold you accountable to a godly standard of living and not allow the precautions to become a prison. Don't isolate in the prison of your thoughts and think that God has forgotten about you, because he has not. The same God that can bring up the issue is the same God who can help you get free and stay free. It's a precaution. When it comes up, allow God and the Holy Spirit to help you navigate that area of your life that is causing you to be imprisoned, so that he can help you be free and free indeed. I pray that this word has been a blessing to you, to your family, to those who are tuning in. Know that I love you, and it is my heart's desire that you would walk free, no longer dancing in grave clothes, no longer dancing in the graveyard, celebrating the freedom of others afar off while you go back to a place where you are dying and in prison. Because God has a pathway for your deliverance. And he wants you to be everything that you are called, anointed, and appointed, and mandated to be. It's a time where people are seeking God who have not sought God before, because a pandemic drove them to the altar. And we have to be postured and positioned and ready to lead them to a path to find Jesus Christ. Don't let somebody walk in on your issue and run tell that without telling the end of the story that contains your complete deliverance. I love you, and God bless you. And I'll see you next week on the evening word. Until then, stay safe, stay blessed, and stay in God's face. I'm Elder Janelle.